Hey guys, welcome back to Anti-hedge. It's been a little while, and looking at all these comments, we could see that you guys actually missed us, which is one of the reasons why we've decided to make a comeback. That's why I'm going to give a special shout out to Alien One, because we had a conversation in Twitter DMs and we started speaking a little bit about our lives, and it made me remember the ethos as to why I started Anti-hedge. You know, to get information back out to the people who need it, especially regarding crypto, which is a very tricky subject. Now, you might be asking yourself, where have we been? Well, I'll tell you exactly where we've been. Basically, what happened was the Canadian economy hasn't been doing so well. Things kind of tanked, things are getting tough, housing crisis is a real thing, and our standard of living is dropping very quickly, especially since the bear market, right, which happened in 2023. And we've just been kind of periodically reshuffling and restructuring ourselves in that time frame and within our personal lives. Meaning that in that time where we took this hiatus, we had to make sure to get our money in order, get our position set for crypto and in our lives, so that way we're not having to sell ourselves short to more or less survive to make ends meet. You know, bring ourselves to a stable level and then relaunch from there. And the other key thing that I wanted to mention is that in that time frame, we also needed to touch grass. So we were funding most of our operation with crypto at that point. So when the market dipped, our funds to make this operation work also dipped. And in that time, we decided it would be best for all of us and for the viewers to touch grass, connect with ourselves, and figure out exactly what our plan is. Now, here we are, fast forward 3 years later, and like I said, we're back. And there's a few key subjects that I wanted to brush up on today. Considering this is our first video back, we're going to go through a little wave of different things, and then we will come back in other videos to cover them in more detail, those subjects. And one of those details that I wanted to mention is that in the time frame where, you know, we took a hiatus, there was also a lot of crypto YouTubers and crypto people who were being targeted. And that was something that I thought about a lot, because my face has kind of become the brand of this channel, meaning that when people think of Anti-hedge and they see me, they know it's me. I had a gentleman once, I was sitting in a bar and he was from New York City, and he had actually recognized me. And I was in a bar in Montreal, and he says, "Oh, I know you." And I said, "How do you know me?" I said as a joke, "Is it Anti-hedge? You know me from Anti-hedge?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, 100%, dude. I've seen you in New York. You were in Times Square. They had you in Madison Square Garden on one of the jumbo screens talking about a crypto." And then it made me realize something. I'm like, oh fuck, everyone kind of knows my face, which is a little bit like some people, they rush towards notoriety and fame, and other people shy away from it, and I'm somewhere in the middle. Meaning I understand, okay, it's nice to be recognized for achievements and things that I'm doing, but it's also a bit scary when people who you don't know recognize you. Not because people are inherently bad, but rather because in times where things get hard, and that's kind of what's happening globally in our economies, out of desperation, people might do bad things. And that's something that me, as not just a person at this channel talking to you, relaying information, but as someone who I will consider anyone who's subscribed and following us, as anyone who's a human, is a friend at that point, right? Like, I want you to know that desperation makes people do bad things. So we took that hiatus to figure out what the best plan of action is, considering that. Now, with that in mind, I've decided it was time to get back out there, regardless of the risks of people recognizing me and trying to do something. We'll move to crypto-related stuff now. This is the chart I've been looking at here. This is the M2 money supply chart, which is money expansion globally, and how closely Bitcoin relates to it. Now, most people, they follow it with an offset of about 70 to 100 days, roughly, depending on who you are. And what you'll notice is that Bitcoin pretty much follows this exact chart, as well as the S&P 500 and gold, and all in different increments of lag, meaning that one could be lagging 50 days, one could be lagging 70 days, doesn't really matter. The reality is that when money expands, so does assets, because it's inflationary, right? So money inflates and assets technically deflate. They become more valuable against the dollar. And I think the key thing here is that money supply has started to expand, and people don't even realize that it's expanding and interest rates are still high, meaning that what we're seeing here is just the beginning. What's about to happen is, as money supply expands, so will the interest rates on the debts that they are collateralizing with bonds to create this money expansion, meaning that we're going to be forced globally to drop our interest rates to zero, putting fiat currency in what's called an Ouroboros cycle, meaning the snake that eats itself infinitely. That's where we're about to head. By 2030, we're there. And that's kind of why I wanted to come back to this channel, was because I have a feeling that Bitcoin's going to end up the global currency. And this needs to get out to as many eyes as possible. Because the reality is that you have BlackRock, you have governments, you have Fidelity, you have all these massive trillion-dollar companies and countries buying up the whole supply. There's only 21 million Bitcoin. They're buying the whole supply, not necessarily because it will become the currency, but I think it's likely it will. But because when the dollar collapses, they're going to be clinging on to whatever they can that could resemble a system. And that might end up Bitcoin. The reality is no one's paying the debts. There's no debts to be paid. No one is paying their debts. So now what happens? The system will default eventually. That's why I tell people, just get into Bitcoin. Doesn't matter what price it's at, just get in. Because let's say every millionaire wanted to buy Bitcoin. There's 87 million millionaires, meaning that they all can't buy one Bitcoin. At best, they could hold maybe 25% of one Bitcoin. That's not even factoring in the companies, the governments, the billionaires that are buying, right? So that dwindles the supply down from your 25% of a Bitcoin, right? And what about the average folk who will eventually shuffle into Bitcoin? 8 billion people. If 8 billion people tried to buy Bitcoin at the same time, let's say they all put $1,000 at the same time, the reality is that every person would end up holding 0.002% of a Bitcoin. That's 20 basis points of a Bitcoin, which is nothing. It's nothing. But that's how much Bitcoin would be divided in by the 8 billion people. And now you haven't even factored in the fact that roughly about 5 to 7 million Bitcoin will just be lost. Sent to the wrong addresses, lost hard drives, dead people who died with thousands of Bitcoin or whatever the case may be. That's a real factor. So if you look at 13 to 15 million Bitcoin divided by 8 billion people, you realize that there's a real supply shock coming. Whether it happens now or in 5 to 10 years, the reality is that all these companies are leveraging their debt to buy Bitcoin. Which brings me to my next point. Stablecoins as a stimulation method. Now the reality is that US bonds are still the main way of collateralizing money and debts and money expansion. Everyone who expands money has to buy collateralized debt via bonds. Now we're heading to two very interesting things. The first one is that USDT and stable coins, if we look at a system where the dollar collapses, I won't take a CBDC. I'm even a bit skeptical of stable coins at that point. But the reality is that stable coins are likely to become the new infrastructure for money. The USDT Tether is closer to the US dollar than the US dollar. And you're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. How does that work? Well, USDT Tether is actually more collateralized in bonds than the US dollar per ratio of expansion. And the craziest thing is when you look at this chart over here, you look at Japan as having the largest treasuries, then China, then the UK. But when you go lower, you realize that Tether is within the top 15. That's one company. They're in the top 15 globally against countries for bond issuance and buying. And you're looking at that and you're like, well, what does that mean for me? Well, it just means that crypto is slowly taking over. And it's doing it not just in terms of, oh, we're shifting the global ethos. No, they're doing it on a level of we're buying bonds. We're buying into the global system and expanding it. That's going to be what stimulates the economy, because what's going to end up happening is they're going to drop the interest rates to zero, and things like Tether and other stablecoins are going to have a way to expand and issue more debt and grow exponentially, especially because Bitcoin's going to explode too. So as Bitcoin explodes, so is the appetite for bonds to buy Bitcoin. Interesting, right? Which brings me to my next point, which are bit bonds. What are bit bonds? Bit bonds are basically how they're talking about inflating the US out of debt in a way that won't collapse the economy. Now, will it work? I'm not sure, but I do think it's probably one of the best ideas they've had. And basically the whole fiscal policy is that they would issue bonds that people could buy, like US debt, and the principal of the bond, let's say you put $1,000 in, or it has a face value of 99 to $1, 99 cents on the dollar, right? You would basically buy it at par value. You'd be guaranteed your initial money back. So if you put 1,000, you'll get 1,000. All right, but that's not interesting. It doesn't beat inflation. You're right, it doesn't. But the yield on Bitcoin will beat inflation. So what they're doing is they're collateralizing the debt so that you get paid back your initial principal, your face value, and then you get your profit determining on how Bitcoin does. But the reason it's genius is because as money supplies expand, so does Bitcoin's value, right? So technically speaking, they'd be inflating the currency to inflate Bitcoin, so that way they could use the Bitcoin to pay down the global US debt. Meaning that it might actually be one of the only things that could save the US dollar from collapsing. And as much as we do want to change in the system, the reality is we can't have an abrasive collapse of the US dollar or the system, because then shit's going to be anarchy. Then Bitcoin, gold, all these things will matter much less, and then you'll need to rotate your capital into lead and guns, because that's how fucked up it could get if the system collapses. And I'd rather be real enough to say that to you. Now, going back to my point, how they're going to make the bit bonds work is that they're going to be taking the Bitcoin yield. You'll get X% of Bitcoin up to a certain point to capitalize the yield. And then after X point, let's say it's a 10% yield, you'll be receiving 50% of the yield, and the government will receive the other 50% of the yield. So it becomes a low-risk way for boomers to get involved with Bitcoin that could actually fix the system. And the reason I think that this is going to be big, and I'll go back to this point right here, is Bitcoin's about to become a global currency. You can't avoid it. The reality is people do not trust the US dollar because it puts sanctions on countries that it deems politically incorrect. And no one trusts China or Russia or any other dollar for that matter, because they have their own issues. China has censorship. Russia just invaded Ukraine. You look at the European Union. How are you going to trust the euro when it's backed by the US dollar? How could you change the current monetary system that's backing the new one? Like, it wouldn't work. If the euro collapses, it collapses on its own. But if the US dollar collapses, the euro collapses with it, right? So that leaves us in a predicament where what do we do? And I think that the system is right in front of our eyes. It's going to be Bitcoin because it's immutable. It's not controlled by one government. It's a network of nodes across the globe. And most importantly, is it's already being used for settlement. Russia is using Bitcoin and USDT to settle oil trades with China. That's not a small thing. We're talking about two economies on the other side of the world that are just functioning like that because of sanctions. And when you look at that, it makes you realize that it's inevitable that we shift to a globalized system. What's going to happen is they're going to use Bitcoin to back all the dollars eventually. It's going to be one of the big money market funds. And they're going to use it the next thing that we're going to see is we're going to see Bitcoin for collateralization at banks, because it's the best collateral. Think about it. There's no maintenance. It's just like a digital IOU that you could collateralize for debt down the line. And that's what it's going to be. It's going to be massive. Now, I could go over to our altcoins. We were looking at some of our community notes over here. We see that you guys missed us, and you know what I mean? Like, I saw that one of you guys even mentioned PolyTrade, and this is going to bring me to my next little segment here that we'll expand on in another video, is that we had some of our coins blow up, make money, and then we had some of our coins blow up and pretty much die. Now, that's going to happen with any crypto channel. Once again, it's not financial advice. You know the ethos of anti-hedge. But we'd like to believe that on average, you did all right if you followed most of our strategies. You know, like, you look at PolyTrade. PolyTrade went from 7 cents to $3. I loaded the dip the whole bear market. So it ended up a fun time for me. And I see some people actually congratulated us for that, and I appreciate that. Thank you. We also saw things like VRA that dropped back down to its 2020 lows, you know, and then you got to ask yourself, which projects do I still believe in? Which ones do I not believe in? And the reality is if I mentioned it on this channel, I still believe in it to some degree, and I still have a bag of it somewhere. So I still have my Luxo, I still have my VRA, I still got my PolyTrade. I held everything. Because for me, I believed in the projects and what they stood for and what they're doing. And when you follow their channels on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, they're still active. And because of that, I still have belief in these projects. And we'll do another video breaking down all these projects from the old guard, so to speak, and all the new projects that we've invested in, like Ondo, Sui, and other ones that are still yet to pop off. Now, if I were to do that in this video, that would just be a long-ass explanation, so we'll skip that. And then I'll kind of wrap this up with my last little segment here. And the last little segment is to say we're back, and in that time frame where we took the time off and we were touching grass, me and the team all went and did our own little personal projects in terms of not just you know, fucking around. You know, we'll edit that part out.
Yeah, it's fine.
Well, whatever. We can even keep this in and let them know, hey, we're human. We fuck up too. But I had went to school to become a stockbroker, and the more I understood about the system, the more I realized I didn't want to participate in a stockbroker system. I realized that the more I understood how money expands and how the debt works and how everything's paper traded, and made me realize that I have no intention or no more, like, I have no intention of joining that system. My morality would not allow me to join the stockbroker system and sell myself to the pension funds, because I realized something. I started that pursuit of knowledge because I thought, oh, this will be good for anti-hedge. But then I realized something. In the pursuit of knowledge and the quest for it, I found something. I found myself. I realized why I started this project. It wasn't to join the hedge funds. It was to take a bat at these hedge funds in the most respectful manner. The reality is that they are there to take your money and not give it back. I'm not getting a pension, and the people in my generation have already been told by the pension funds who have $11 trillion under their management that we're not getting a pension. Imagine $11 trillion and they don't have the money to pay us a pension. It's a Ponzi scheme. The new people pay out the old people until there's no one left to pay into the system, and that's what we're about to hit. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to get back on this, is to help everyone navigate the tough times that might be ahead of us. And in that time too, where I entered school, dropped out of school, and did all that, I became a black belt, getting my second degree black belt as well. And it's funny because we had some people in the comments section telling me I look like Dominic Reyes, and it's hilarious because I do kind of see it. And it's funny because, you know, like, I'm going to be competing in kickboxing and MMA, like, I guess I am like YouTube's Dominic Reyes now. But hopefully I don't get knocked out, you know what I mean? But, you know, respect for you guys, and if you guys want to follow some of our other channels, because in that time frame we were learning how to build new channels to fuck around with it. And then when we found like our passion, we were like, let's pick this up again. So we got Fist Fight Club. If you ever want to see me do martial arts technique, you could definitely check it out. You're going to see this beautiful mug over here doing martial arts and teaching you guys techniques. We got Fizz, what's your channel called?
Fizz Finds.
Fizz Finds. So we got Fizz Finds, and what he does is he's pulling Pokemon cards and showing you all the different pulls that he's getting, and he's building up a pretty crazy collection of incredible cards. He even got a few Charizards up in there, wink wink. So it is different, but I wanted to mention to you guys that like we are doing other things as well, you know? We wanted to test ourselves in other domains. And the key here is that we'll leave our links in the description if you want to check out our other channels, because at the end of the day, like, we're a community. You know, we saw how much you guys actually cared, because it's been 3 years and you guys are still commenting on our stuff. And then it made me realize, like, yo, y'all actually fucking wanted us to win. That's a real thing, and I appreciate that. So we'll leave the links to our other channels that we're working on, and you guys could definitely like follow us and keep up with us, and we'll be dropping a lot more videos for Anti-hedge as well. We're back, guys, and if you stayed to the end of this video, we really do appreciate your viewership as always, and we'll be stepping up to make sure that we could provide content the way we used to for you guys, and better. Thank you.